Buenos días a todos. Good morning to you all. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Susana Ibarra Johnson, and I'm a teacher support specialist at Albuquerque Public Schools. And thank you so much for joining us for this episode of At Home with APS. This episode will be about English language development. So what is that? What is English language development? That is further developing your language skills with listening, speaking, reading, and writing in English. Now, you can always use your home language if you can, because you also want to learn the knowledge that I am going to be teaching you today. And you can use, if you speak Spanish, Swahili, Arabic, Hmong, whatever home language you have in your responses. In particular, we're going to be looking at observations and questions. So how do we develop those? Because learning a second language is not easy. It's different than your home language, so you have to be able to learn how to do that and also to practice it. But our focus will be on writing. And the lesson is called Writing from Photographs. So we will get started. And what we're going to look at here at a photograph that you will see there. So since the focus is writing, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this photograph right here. The photograph you see on the screen is titled Neighborhood Celebrations by Elizabeth Herman from the New York Times. This is a scene from New York City block party, a tradition that goes back as far as the 1860s. In which residents across the boroughs take to their streets with lawn chairs, pools, tables full of food to enjoy the summer together. So this neighborhood celebration photograph will be very important to really take a look at it. We will return back to it to see your observations and questions that you may have. But before we get started with that, I do want to point out that our main objective today, or what I call language objective, if you want to look here, it is students will do close observations and develop questions from a photograph. So this is why looking at that photograph and observing it is so very important as we started off today. What we will do, as I walk over here, I want to show you because materials are very important. And what I want you to do is I want you to, if you don't have a paper and pencil right now, I want you to be able to get that. So for example, you can use, this is a composition book, and if you brought it home from school, you can get something else, but you can use a blank sheet of paper from your composition book. You can also use any type of piece of paper. You can have a blank sheet of paper or a rule-lined paper. Either or will be just fine for our lesson today. You can use a pencil. I like using pencils when I write because oftentimes when I write, sometimes I forget. I read what I've written the day before, and I'm like, wow, this doesn't make sense to me. Or I may forget an apostrophe in one of my words, a period, or maybe even I misspell something and I insert an E there if it was missing from that word. So pencils are important for writers, and that way you can make your own edits as you need be. And so like I said, our objective is to really look at close observations. So that's very important. So I'm going to walk towards this chart paper over here. Okay. You have whatever form of piece of paper you have. If yours looks like this, what you're going to do is you're going to create a T chart with me, and I will guide you. So I'm going to get a black marker here so you can see. What you want to start off with first is a horizontal line that goes across the paper, the chart paper here, okay? And then a vertical line that you kind of want to center. You can see mine's a little lopsided, but that's okay. At the center of right here of the of the horizontal line that you just drew. So now you're probably guessing, why do they call it a T chart? Well, because look, it looks like a capital T, so that's a T chart. And it's very important. You can use it for many writing activities, for brainstorming, for things that you want to jot down and write about if you're watching a video or listening to a read aloud, and so forth. So we will be now adding the words. The first word would be observation. Observation. And actually, I'm going to put an S for plural, observations, because you're going to be making more than just one observation. So it'll be observations. On the other side, you will then write, you're going to write questions, okay? So you're going to write questions on that as well. And again, we're going to use the plural because it's more than one question that you will be writing as well. And if it looks a little lopsided like mine, don't worry about it. It's the ideas, the knowledge, and the skills that you will be writing on this that's the most important, okay? So we have that done there. So in order for us to be able to do the observations and questions, I want to talk a little bit about what are observations and what are not observations. So I have some vocabulary words right here that are very important. So there's observations and there's assumptions, okay? So if we look at here, observation requires for us to describe what we see. An observation is what you see. A lot of times you use your senses, what you hear, what you see, what you smell. Those are observations because you can either see, hear, smell, for example. So that is very important. So if I walk towards the photograph here, our neighborhood celebrations photograph, you can see, I can see a girl jumping. That's an observation, right? And so if we look at an observation, is what you see. So that's a very key word, see. I will now move to an assumption. We do not want to make assumptions of what about that photograph. So, for example, an assumption is, or not an example, the definition is a guess or a hunch without proof. So, I think, so let's walk back to my photograph over here. And I'm going to actually look at this girl that is wearing, I'm going to point to her, she's wearing a blue blouse with blue jeans, and I'm going to say, I think the girl is bored. Do you think that's an assumption or an observation? What do you, or I could say, the girl watching is bored. What is that an assumption? Yes, it is. It is an assumption because how do I know if she's bored? I know she's standing there, but you can see she's looking down, so I'm making an assumption that, she's bored. Is there a caption there that I read that says she's bored? Or did she tell me that she's bored? No, she didn't. I'm assuming that she is bored just because of what her site is, but again, it's it's a guess. It's a guess that I have. So we have to be careful between observations and assumptions. And we are focused today on observations, okay? So those are two key words to remember when you write your observations. All right, so let's move over here to our chart paper, and let me get my marker. And I will be providing some what I call sentence stems. So they're called sentence stems because I give you the beginning part of the sentence. So I'm going to say, for example, I see ... Then I'm going to put ... because you will fill in the blank for that, whatever you see with the photograph that we have here. So I see, and I'm going to also share another one. I observe ... And I don't know, maybe a third one. Okay, let me see. It pops into my head. So let me see. There are ... So those are sentence stems that you can use when you write your observations here. I shared some with you, and so what I want you to do now is we're going to walk over here to our neighborhood celebration photograph, and we're going to display it there for you to observe. And I'm going to give you some time for you to observe this photograph and make up to 3 observations. 3 observations that you remember that you see in this photograph. Let's get started. And I'm going to write mine too, as you are writing. So, keep writing there. I'm going to write some for me here that I can share with you. Okay, I'm going to write one more. Okay, are we ready? Hopefully you had some time to write up to 3 observations. Okay, so I'm going to share some of mine, share 1 or 2 of mine observations that I wrote. So I'm going to write them down here. So I'm going to write, I see, okay, a hopscotch pattern. Okay, so I see a hopscotch pattern. If you remember in the photo, so if we walk over here, look at the photo. I don't know if you observed, I did, because back when I was a child, my childhood years, I did a lot of hopscotch. I observed a hopscotch pattern, kind of a grid there that you use chalk, and you put down 1 through 10, and you have to, she's jumping rope right now, but I'm sure that afterwards they would do some hopscotch. So you basically throw a pebble, and then you go from one block to another to do the hopscotch. So that's what I observed, and I had keyed into that right away because I thought, wow, I have not seen that in a long time. So that is a hopscotch pattern that you see there, that you put numbers. Okay, so I'll write one more here. So I'll write down here, I observe, okay, a girl jumping. Okay, I observe a girl jumping. As you can see here, you will see we have 2 sentence stems that I used. I used 2 sentence stems that are very key that I shared with you earlier, that are very important and in regards to observations. Because observations are very key to science, for example. When you're observing in science, you have to, what they say is very empirical. So what is the evidence that you see in that science lesson? What is the experiment that you do? You have to write down all the different steps that go from a hypothesis all the way to the results. So you have to be able to observe it. And, I see it, I observe it. You cannot, again, make assumptions like, I think it's going to work because once you put this liquid into here, you have to actually see it, explore it, and then write down the results. So again, these observations are very important. And these are obviously not the only sentence stems you can use. These are just some that I share with you, so that you can, be thinking when you're in science lab, for example, and you're like, okay, I know how to do an observation because it has to be you have to be able to see it, right? In regards to what we're looking at today. So these are two that I noticed in regards to our photograph. And what I want you to do when we're done with this lesson is take those observations and share it with someone at home. Share it, tell them about what you observed today, and share it all, and read it to them. And then also you can, from a book, from a newspaper article, from a TV show, whatever that you're seeing, make some observations and create your T-chart to also include what you are observing, okay? So these are our observations. So now we will be moving towards more your questions, though. It's very important to develop questions. And so why are questions important in any content area that you are in when you're learning English? Why is it important to be able to develop questions? You can develop very general questions or very detailed questions or very higher order thinking questions. So I am going to share with you a tool that you can use that I like to use with my teachers that I work with across Albuquerque Public Schools so that they can teach you, because I think it's very important in developing questions. So if you see here, I call it the question tree. And the question tree is, as you can see, it has a lot of question stems. So remember, I showed you the sentence stems that you can use for observations. And these are question stems. So question stems will really help you generate and construct different questions that will really develop conversations and dialogues in your classroom or with a partner if you're speaking with a partner. Because sometimes let's look at the top one. If you ask somebody, what is your name? What type of response will they give you? That's right. They'll say, my name is Susana Ibarra Johnson. End of conversation. So as an English language development or an English learner, you really want to be able to speak more and more and more and share more so that you will be able to develop the English language more. And so what you can start off with is, of course, is like with, as we have here with when, why, how, who, what, where. These are basic. Sometimes you might have heard your teacher call them as the who, what, when, where, and why. The 5 W's. So, and the H, of course, doesn't start with the W, but the 5 W's and the how. So these are very important, very, very general, that you can ask questions, that you can identify things and by asking these questions. However, if we look down here, at the bottom of our question tree, we have them here in blue. You have should, could, is, what if, do, and does. So these are a little more, you get to a little more questions that will trigger a lot more conversation, that will be able to enable you to speak more with other students. So if you're sitting with somebody, or discussing a classroom conversation, you say, what if in that photograph they had a celebration in 3 different blocks, or whatever question that you may make. I'm just making this up. So it kind of provokes a lot more thinking. You're kind of like, what if a man did not go up to outer space? What if? Wow, that's a big question. So there's just a lot of things that you can ask, and you can start either debating or conversing about that particular question that you have. So further, I have here my plus sign there, and meaning that you're going to add. So in this question tree, you can add from the top, the green words you have here, to the bottom. So I created some for you, and this is the whole This is for, I combined who should, how would, where can, what do you think? I like starting a lot of conversations with my students with, what do you think? Because sometimes I'm like, I read a book out loud and I'm like, so what do you think about the story? And that's very open-ended. So those are open-ended questions that the students are like, well, I think it was good. And I'm like, okay, tell me more about why it was good. And then I can further ask questions. And you can do the same with your own partner, with your small group, or in a classroom conversation. Because again, English language development is developing listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So that's very important in the English language. Of course, sometimes, you may be thinking like I do sometimes. Sometimes I think in my home language, which is Spanish, and I'm like, I don't know how to answer that in English, and sometimes I do use my home language, which is okay, and then you can come back and they will speak to you in English, and you start developing more and more because you are listening and to the questions. So here I provided you, as I said, it's called the question tree, and you could use it in many different ways. We're going to use it today to write questions because I think it's very important. The types of questions that you develop, they could, again, come from the tree branches here on the top, the bottom part, kind of the ground there, and then here in the middle part of the question tree. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to move towards my question T chart there, and I want you to be able to write questions. And so I'm going to give you some time one last thing. I'm going to give you an oral example. I know I gave you an example of all the different question stems. But if you were to use, for example, using the photograph, to write, I'm going to orally tell you this, if you were to do a question on maybe perhaps where is this celebration happening? Do you remember? Do you remember in the beginning I gave you a little bit of context of what this photograph was all about? And I hope you remember. Well, I'll answer it very quickly. It's in New York City. It's in a borough in New York City. So anyways, so that's just an oral question that I'm sharing with you. So now I'm going to write, just as I did with the observations, I'm going to write up to 3 questions. And you will write it on your T-chart. And one thing that I forgot to mention earlier was that if you want to write it in your home language, so you want to write these questions in your home language. Remember, your home language could be Spanish, Swahili, Hmong, Arabic, whatever that home language may be. You may do that because our objective is, of course, to develop the English language, but also the knowledge and skills for you to understand what are observations, how do you develop questions. And then maybe later you can find, maybe use a dictionary or Google Translate and translate them into English, okay? So let's do that. Let's take some time to write up to 3 questions. And I'm going to get my notebook as well to do that. So let's write some questions. And we will leave it on the question tree so that you will be able to use that information that I just went over with you. Okay. Okay, I know I probably didn't give you a lot of time, but hopefully you wrote down, remember, up to 3 questions. So if you wrote 1, great, 2, great, 3, great as well. So we're going to move over here, and I'm going to share my questions that I wrote about the photograph. And remember, I cued you in the beginning, but I probably didn't reinforce. Remember, we were supposed to, I was writing the questions in regards to the lady in the blue, in the white shirt with a plaid shorts there. So I'm kind of focusing on that person there. And I'm kind of thinking, about that lady. What is she thinking? Okay, what is she thinking? I don't know. If we look at her, what is she thinking? What is she thinking? You know, because she's looking at something. So I'm like, what is she thinking as she is watching the girl jump? Also, kind of wondering here, why is she looking at the girl's feet? Okay. So these are questions that I came up with, and I am going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you another opportunity to write some questions, because I'm going to walk towards over here. I got so involved with my question tree here that I forgot to mention to you that before you write, you have to identify, or you have to select someone from the photo here in order for you to write the questions. So like my example I just gave you is that I was focusing on the lady here with a white shirt and shorts. And that's why I said, you know, what is she thinking? Why is she looking at the girl's feet? Because you could see her vision is right straight down to the feet there. So I'm going to give you, again, just a little bit of time to kind of rearrange your question there, because if you wrote questions that are spot on, no problem. But just give you a pause a little bit there to kind of identify somebody here. So maybe you select here this boy right there that has a ball. And I believe he has a basketball. I don't have my glasses with me, but I believe that's what it is. But you can, whomever you decide to choose from this photograph. And then write, again, just maybe one question on your paper there. So let's do that right now. Remember to use your question tree as well. Okay, so thank you for making those changes, those little tweaks that you might have done. This is where, remember, in the beginning I asked, pencils are always great because you can always edit, erase whatever you need to, or add to what your questions were. So these were my questions that I shared with you. So some other questions that draw a little more kind of critical thinking, a little more conversation, more open-ended. I'm going to write these actually in red because they come from the middle portion of our question tree. Okay, so I have two that I want to share with you, and perhaps some of you have written some of those as well. So that's great. So I'm going to write these because I think they're very important questions that will about that particular lady that I chose from the photo. So here's my question. What do you think she is looking at? So if we look at our photo, what do you think? Again, this is the lady I chose. What do you think she's looking at? Her feet, the hopscotch, maybe she's counting to see how many times, as she does the jump rope. And perhaps it's called double dutch. I used to do that when I was little, the type of rope, because you had 2 ropes. So I have no idea. I'm just curious about that. What do you think she is looking at? Okay. My second one that is where, my writing is getting smaller and smaller, isn't it? Where can she jump in to join the girl? I'm really curious about this. Really, really curious about where can she jump in. If we look at our photo over here and walk towards our photo. So where can she jump in to join the girl? Again, when I used to jump rope, I always used to strategize. When it went down, I would jump in there to be able to start jumping with the jump ropes there. So I'm curious, is that perhaps, now that's a question that I have. I don't know if she's strategizing. She's trying to figure out when she can go in. I know a lot of you jump ropes, so it's very strategic. It's not, you can't just, stand there and just plop yourself there. You have to be, so, that's a question. If I was sitting there with you, I would ask you that, and you could give me ideas of how I can do it, how I can strategize to jump into that, to jump rope with the girl that's jumping there. Okay, so just questions that I have, very open-ended questions that I'm sure if we were in the classroom, you would be able to answer them for me and discuss it with me and share with me and tell me about how you would do it and so forth. So these are, again, we're going to kind of review back over here. So we did, from our writing from photograph, we did our observations. We did our questions that you have. Of course, you have that with your piece of paper that you have. And, I'm sure that you have yours as well. So to leave you, our last part of our lesson today is that I want you to be able to, I'm going to flip this over here. I want you to leave you with a journal entry prompts. There's 2 of them, okay, or several, 3 of them actually. I'm going to put this up here. Here we go. I'm going to put these here so that you can see them, okay. I'll read them to you and explain them a bit. So these prompts, again, drawing from your observations, questions, and how we develop those, the question tree, and all that we've been doing this time together, is I want you to now look at these questions, and is what kinds of get-togethers does your neighborhood or community host? So, for example, in my community, one of our neighbors has a hot air balloon, and he loves to, during the fall break and also the balloon fiesta, he takes out his balloon and he displays it for all the neighborhood to see. And my children love it a lot because they've never been in a hot air balloon, but they've seen one out in our beautiful blue sky, New Mexican skies. And then so she's like, our neighbor takes it out and shares it with you. So that's a get-together that we do in our neighborhood and in our community, and she shares it with us on a yearly basis. And so the second question is, what do you like best about them? So what I like best about them is because it's the beginning of fall, and you can see the leaves, the foliage, the leaves falling and so forth. So that's why I like it, and being outside and watching the hot air balloon ascend into the sky. And so the third question is, if you do not have a get-togethers in your community, think of some ideas to share with your community members. So if you don't have one, that's okay. Think about, what are some things that we can do in our neighborhood community or your barrio there that you have. What is it that you can do so that you can share, maybe birthday parties or whatever it may be. So you think about it and write about it in either if you have a composition book, or if the piece of paper that you have, just put on the other side of the paper, go ahead and write the journal entry prompt, the different prompts. Now, I know you will have some time to write it, so I want you to be able to, we're going to leave it here so that give you a little bit of time to write down these prompts, whichever one you select, and be able to then write about it. As you are writing, I'm going to tell you that you can definitely, once you are done with this, you can share this. I want you to, this would be great for your language development. I want you to be able to take what you learned today, the observations, the questions, and even what you write in your prompt, with one or two other people in your household there, a grown-up, or maybe a friend on the phone that you can say, hey, this is what I learned. Because I want you to practice. Again, language development is about practicing. It's about being able to, in this case, you'll be able to use your writing for speaking. So it's very important for you to do that. And I really would like for you to be able to do that with someone at home, okay? So hopefully you had some time to write down the prompts there. I'll give you a couple more seconds to do this. And so we thank you so much for joining us here. This is the episode of Home with APS. And our focus today was with English language development and looking in writing from photographs. And hopefully you keep observing and keep writing about your observations in your time, and either you can use a newspaper clipping, a book, or whatever it is. But write them down. Practice that writing. It's very important.
2, 1.
Buenos dias, otra vez. Good morning again. Good to have you. Join me now for a read aloud of Dreamers. But before I get started and tell you a little more about the book Dreamers, is that we do have American Sign Language interpreter that will be interpreting in English. And because this book is a translanguaging book that I call it, they does have sprinkled in it some Spanish, so he will not be able to interpret the Spanish. However, when I reach to that word, I will translate it for you and speak to it what the meaning is. Okay? So, my name is Susana Ibarra Johnson, and I work at Albuquerque Public Schools, and I'm glad, boys and girls, that you're joining us in this episode of Home with APS, and now for a read aloud. And the book that I selected is Dreamers, a topic that I think is just a wonderful topic in regards to, and illustrator as well, of this book that I read several times in some classrooms, and perhaps in one of your classrooms. And this book, the author is Yuyi Morales, and she's the author and illustrator of this book, and you will see that the illustrations are fabulous. And the publisher, as I move to, is actually Holiday House, New York. And it's Dreamers by Yuyi Morales. I dreamed of you, then you appeared together. We became amor, love, amor. Resplendent life, you and I. Now remember, amor is love in Espanol. One day, we bundled gifts in our backpack and crossed a bridge outstretched like the universe. Adios, corazón. So you can see here in these beautiful illustrations that Yuyi has done here. They're taking a journey away from their home, out in the universe, as she says. And they say, adios, corazón. Goodbye, my love. And when we made it to the other side, thirsty in awe, unable to go back, we became immigrants. Migrantes, you and I. The sky and the land welcome to us in words unlike those of our ancestors. And you can see here in the banner it says, give thanks. So let's look at the word migrantes. Migrantes is immigrants. It is a word that's similar in English and in Spanish. So they're immigrants coming from their country into another country. So they are immigrants. You can see that they started their journey and walking towards their destination. There were so many things we didn't know, unable to understand, and afraid to speak. We made lots of mistakes. So you can see here, what do you see here? These illustrations are so rich. We have here her calling from a phone and saying, hello, aquí estamos, mamá. Hello, here we are, mama. And so she's calling back home. You can see from the journey here in the map that they're starting from their home country here and moving on towards California. And the voyage continues on. You can see their passage, their pathway towards that. And it says, we made lots of mistakes. So they made a lot of mistakes. You can see that they jumped into a fountain there and mistakenly and said, like, oh my goodness. And the policeman's not very happy that that happened. But again, they made mistakes, but they move on. Let's see. You and I became caminantes. Caminantes is voyagers, walkers that are taking a voyage from one place to another. Thousands and thousands of steps. We look around this land until the day we found. What did they find? If you look here, what is it that they found? They have signs, people that are on the street, and they have signs that say, "Sí se puede," yes, we can. Hear our voices. So if you see here, "Sí se puede" is a very, it's a speech that Cesar Chavez talked about. "Sí se puede," a saying that he said when he did his farm worker work in California. So it's a very popular saying that even President Obama used in his campaign, which is, yes, we can. So you can see all the different signs. So that's why she's like, wow, they found these signs. And for them, they were like, wow, yes, we can move on. And she does. A place we had never seen before. Suspicious, improbable. What is this place that she found? Take a look at the picture. Look at that. What is it that she found with her daughter there? What is it? You can see books, different books. Mi Familia from Carmen Lopez, My Family. A vast number of books that you can see in the library. That's right, it's a library. And she seems to be in awe of what is in the library, and even new words that she saw, like suspicious and improbable, as I just read. So let's continue on to see what she discovers. Unbelievable, surprising. So for her, the books were unbelievable and surprising. Just the abundance of books and being able to check them out and read them and share them with her daughter there. And so I think that is very important to see all the different books that she can select from. Very beautifully illustrated in this book. Unimaginable. Another word, unimaginable. as she continues to read and read and read, for her, it's unimaginable all the different books that are there and that she can read from. And more importantly, that she can go to the library and check out for free, just like you do in the summer, that you are able to check out all these unimaginable amount of books at your local library. Where we didn't need to speak, we only needed to trust. And we did. So you can see her with all the books, the reading, when you're reading in your mind and you're listening almost to the words that are coming out of the different books that you read. Very important. Books became our language. Books became our home. Books became our lives. We learned to read. And there she is with her books. You can see her backpack full of books coming out in abundance to speak, to write, and to make our voices heard. Let's see. Someday we will become something we haven't even yet imagined. But right now, we are stories. We are two languages. We are lucha. We are resilience. We are hope. We are dreamers, soñadores of the world. We are love, amor, love. Let's look at this image here. You can see she says in two languages. That's very important. You heard words in two languages that we looked at, like amor, which is love, or lucha. I talked about the si se puede. Yes, we can. When we say lucha, it doesn't mean a fight. Lucha means like a challenge, similar to a fight, but in regards to rights that people have, for things that they want to be able to do in a new country, for example. So that's why she said we are lucha. They continue to persevere and do things. And so the other word that is there is soñadores. She uses soñadores for dreamers, the title of the book, which actually she has this book in Spanish. Soñadores is called Soñadores, and it's all written in Spanish. And soñadores are dreamers. So those are the people that come from another country and immigrate into the United States, for example, and they become dreamers and someday dream to be able to become U.S. citizens here in USA. And some of the things, and this is a picture, I want to show you the picture of Yuyi Morales, and this is her right here. And again, she is the writer and the illustrator and has won, for some of her other books, she has won Calcutt Honor of her books. But several things that I want to ask you in regards to Dreamers by Yuyi Morales. I want to ask you some questions that she even ponders herself and has written in her book. So, what if you dreamed of a new life and it came to you? So what if you dreamed of a new life? You came, for example, my parents are immigrants from Mexico. And when they immigrated, they had dreams of us all going to college and becoming school teachers like myself. And so what do you dream of your new life? Think about that. Or perhaps I'm going to ask you another question. What if that new life led you to a new country where no one spoke your language, where you felt alone and ignored? So like Yuyi and her daughter, what if you went to a new country and you didn't know the language? What would you do? Where will you reach out? What community members? So there's a lot of things to think about in that. And we're fortunate that in Albuquerque Public Schools, we do have a lot of community services and programs from the kindergarten to 12th grade for bilingual education and learning English language development. So look at those opportunities. And then lastly, a couple more. What if you had to make the new place your home? So if you do immigrate either from another country or you migrate to another state, what do you do in that new place? you become a dreamer and you start dreaming about different things that you can do, different places, who you can be, your new friends, and so forth. And another question is, what if you found that home in a world of books? So, of course, Yuri was dreaming about coming from another country, from her home country to another country, but you don't even have to travel. If your imagination, you can definitely read books, and that will take you to different homes that you can discover and think about as you read those books. And what if all were true? So as I placed all these questions to you and as you thought about it, what are some things that, yourself as a dreamer, as our book here is, as a dreamer, what is it that you can do as a dreamer with books? Now, there are a lot of different books. I'm going to actually share with you a little bit about Yuyi Morales because I think this is, in essence, her book about her story of who she is when she came as a dreamer to the United States. So I'm going to read this to you because I think it's important to recognize herself as a dreamer and who she is. So I'll read a little bit about her. She was born and raised in Mexico, and again, her name is Yuyi Morales. She immigrated to the United States with her son, Kelly, in 1994. At the time, she barely spoke any English. Since then, she has written or illustrated many distinctive books for children, including 5 that won the prestigious the Pura Pulpre Award. So some of these books you might have read in your classroom. I hope you have, and I know some of these books Albuquerque Public Schools has distributed in your libraries, so hopefully you have read some of these. If not, remember, you can go to the local library and check them out. So this is some of the books. Some of the titles of her books are Just a Minute, A Trickster Tale, and Counting Book. I've actually have read that one. That one is a very good book, and of course, it's teaching counting in the book, and the illustrations are just very rich in that book. Another book of Yuyi Morales is Los Gatos Black on Halloween. So Los Gatos means cats. So cats, black cats in Halloween. I actually have not read that one, but remember, I think that would be another great title for you to look for and to read. And the next one is Just in Case, a Trickster Tale and Spanish Alphabet Book. Another book, she has a counting book for numbers, and now this is an alphabet book for you to learn the alphabet. And she does it in regards with the Trickster Tale. So another great book, and the best thing about Yuyi Morales books is that they're bilingual. They're in English and in Spanish, and so you can check that one out as well. Another title is Niño Wrestles the World. So Niño is what? A boy. Yeah, a boy. So Niño Wrestles the World. And I can imagine what that's about. The title is a very curious title because I wonder, what is he wrestling about? And then this other one that's probably one of my favorite books, especially if you're doing art. It's called Viva Frida, and I have used this book a lot with my students, in particular when we're studying different art forms. So Frida Kahlo was an artist from Mexico, and she drew a lot of portraits of herself. And then also her husband was named Diego Rivera, which also drew not so much portraits, but he did a lot of murals of Diego, for Mexico and United States and different places. So Viva Frida, and if you're one, that's definitely a great book, beautifully illustrated by Yuyi Morales. And again, she has received the Calcutt Honor for many of her books. And this is her book, dreamers. And I hope you enjoyed it and are able to check it out in your local library or your school library. Thank you so much for joining me.